So, Peter Capaldi's time as the Doctor has come to an end. This is not a review of the entirety of Twice Upon a Time, but only one aspect of the 2017 Christmas special. I will say this though, Capaldi's performance was brilliant, as always, and his speech at the end was awesome. The rest of the episode was somewhat problematic. Sorry, I just had to throw that word in there. But the full review will be a subject for another video. If anybody had doubts about the feminist agenda present at the end of the Moffat era, these were surely confirmed during Twice Upon a Time. I'm referring specifically to the treatment of William Hartnell, Doctor Number 1, in this episode. Basically, he seems to have been recreated as a sexist bigot. Only one line would have been grating enough, but Moffat does this over and over again. At only 13 minutes into the episode, the first Doctor states, "This place could do with a good dusting." Obviously, Polly isn't around anymore. This joke is used at several points in the episode. At 24 minutes in, the first Doctor tells Bill that the ship is in dire need of a spring cleaning. At 26 minutes in, the first Doctor states, "Aren't all ladies made of glass?" And he has, quote, "some experience of the fairer sex." When did the first Doctor ever go on about his experiences with women? We can assume he did have some experience as he had a granddaughter, but when was this aspect of his character ever shown on screen? It wasn't. Now, I would like to point out a hole in Stephen Moffat's own writing. In only one episode prior to this, Capaldi stated that Time Lords have no concept of gender, that they were above that sort of thing. Of course, this was only inserted to solidify the main character's upcoming gender change. But Moffat directly contradicts himself only one episode later. If Time Lords indeed have no concept of gender, then how is it that the Doctor now appears to be a misogynist in his first incarnation? This doesn't add up. You can't have it one way and then completely change it one episode later. If indeed Time Lords have no real concept of gender, why does the first Doctor think women are made of glass and only good for cleaning? Why does the Doctor seem surprised when Bill reminds us yet again of her sexual orientation? Then Moffat decides to go completely over the top and recreate a quote from the Dalek invasion of Earth. You know the one I'm talking about. The jolly good smack bottom crap. Firstly, let's put the original quote in its historical context. While I definitely do not condone it, these types of threats were not uncommon from authority figures in the familial context in the 1960s. Just ask anyone who grew up during that time period. Susan was the Doctor's granddaughter, and, while we don't know her exact age, she was definitely underage. We'll set aside the argument of Gallifreyan and human relative ages for now. Again, I do not condone this in any way, but in keeping with the context of the time it was from, it could be argued that it was accurate. Now, let's fast forward to 2017, and Moffat, in a grand gesture of virtue signaling against the evil patriarchy, decides to bring this line back again. In this instance, we have the first Doctor threatening to assault a grown woman that he has just met. Someone remind me, where did we see this type of thing in the original series? We didn't, but Moffat just had to throw it in there. This is now the most ridiculous line in the history of Doctor Who. There has always been a divide, to a certain extent, between fans of the original series and New Who. I was never part of this divide until recently. I had always seen New Who as a continuation of the original series. In many ways, Rose picked up right where Survival left off. Watch both stories back to back, and you'll see that the tone really is very similar. But in the last few series, New Who really did decide to go off on its own tangent. It started to become a show more interested in feminism or social justice, or at least certain elements of the show adopted these ideologies wholeheartedly. But there is some very clear symbolism in Twice Upon a Time. This episode almost betrays classic Who, or at least the Hartnell era, as something to be ashamed of. There seems to be little conscious thought about the context of the time in which these stories were written. This also does a great disservice to the late William Hartnell, who passed away over 4 decades ago. A large portion of Doctor Who's current fanbase has probably never watched any of his episodes. Indeed, they are much slower paced and unlikely to be able to hold the attention of some of today's younger viewing audience, which is a shame. The version of the first Doctor, as it is presented in this episode, is the impression they are left with, and it is not accurate to the original characterization. What we see here, to a certain extent, is New Who disowning classic Who. While Moffat is known for excessive fan service, in this case, he seems to have done it to the detriment of the show. The media, of course, praises the episode, and those that are less than happy are once again ignored. I think that some people that were on the fence about the female Doctor over the past few months may have made their decisions about whether or not to stick with the show after this episode. The climate around Doctor Who has been controversial, to say the very least, and Moffat made the decision to double down on feminist ideology in his final episode. I think there can be little question about where the show is headed in the future, and that's all for today. So as always, everyone, thank you for watching, and have a good day.